Okay, I want you to do something for me. Just, close your eyes for a second. Let's do a little time travel.
All right, I'm with you.
Go back to a Friday night. Let's say it's 1999, maybe 2002. You've had a long week. You're finally in the car, or maybe you're in the back seat of your parents' minivan, and you pull into that brightly lit strip mall. You walk through those double glass doors, and it just hits you instantly.
The smell.
The smell, yes. It's that incredibly specific mix of, what is it, ozone from the TVs,
Yeah.
carpet cleaner, stale popcorn.
And the warm plastic from the VHS cases.
The warm plastic, yes. It's a sensory trigger that I think is hardwired into the brain of pretty much anyone over the age of 30.
It really is. It's almost Pavlovian. You smell that, and your brain immediately signals, okay, work is over. The weekend has officially started.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you have the whole ritual. You rush to the new releases wall, scanning for that one copy of The Matrix or Titanic that isn't behind one of those little rented out signs.
Right, and you're elbowing other families out of the way to get to it.
You are. Maybe you grab a box of snowcaps or Raisinets at the counter. I mean, for a solid 2 decades, that blue and yellow ticket stub, that was the absolute center of the entertainment universe.
It was complete cultural dominance.
Yeah.
Absolute, unquestioned dominance. But if you open your eyes and you look at the world today, that entire empire has just evaporated.
It's gone.
I mean, we are talking about a company that at its absolute peak, this is in 2004, had 9,094 stores globally.
9,000.
They employed 84,300 people.
84,000 people. That's bigger than the entire population of Santa Fe, New Mexico, just working for a video store.
Exactly. And today, what's left of all that? There is exactly one franchise store left on the entire planet. Just one? In Bend, Oregon.
From over 9,000 to 1.
Yeah.
That is, it's honestly hard to even comprehend that level of collapse. And that's really what we are unpacking today, because the easy narrative, the one everyone, repeats at dinner parties is, oh, Netflix came along, streaming happened, and Blockbuster was just this big dinosaur that was too slow to notice.
Right, the classic technology killed the beast story. And while technology obviously played a massive role, that is such an oversimplification. It actually misses all the most interesting, the most dramatic parts of the story.
I have a feeling you're going to tell us that Blockbuster was actually way more high-tech than any of us give them credit for.
They were. This isn't just a story about streaming versus physical media. This is a story about incredible corporate hubris. It's a story about internal civil wars that literally tore the company's leadership apart. And it's a story about specific, agonizingly painful missed opportunities that had almost nothing to do with bandwidth and everything to do with vision.
Okay, so we're going to dig into that.
Yeah, we are. We're going to look at the corporate history, the financial filings, the leadership struggles that turned a multi-billion-dollar juggernaut into, well, a single tourist attraction in Oregon.
I am so ready to dive in. But before we get to the fall, we have to talk about the rise. Because I think most people, myself included, probably assume Blockbuster was started by some movie buffs who just, loved cinema.
And that is the very first misconception we need to just clear out of the way. The origin of Blockbuster has almost nothing to do with movies. It has everything to do with oil and gas databases.
Oil. Okay, you have to explain that connection. That makes no sense.
So we have to talk about the founder, a man named David Cook. And he was not a Hollywood guy. He wasn't a film school grad. In 1978, he founded a company called Cook Data Services.
Cook Data Services.
And his business was supplying software and database management services to the oil and gas industries in Texas. He was a data guy, a mainframe guy. He thought in terms of efficiency and scale.
So how on earth do you go from drilling for oil to renting out VHS tapes?
Well, to put it simply, his oil software business tanked. It wasn't successful. But his wife, Sandy Cook, was actually the one who suggested the video business. She saw the potential there. So David Cook, being a data guy, takes a look at the video rental industry in the early 80s. And what does he see?
I'm guessing. Just a lot of mom and pop stores with index cards and really chaotic shelves.
Precisely. It was a completely fragmented, totally inefficient mess. The stores were small, the selection was limited, and everything was tracked by hand. Cook realized he could apply his background in managing these massive databases to the problem of video rental.
So he didn't see movies. He saw inventory units.
He saw SKUs. He saw inventory units that needed to be tracked efficiently across a large network. He basically saw it as a logistics problem, not a cinema problem.
So Blockbuster was a big data company disguised as a video store right from the very beginning.
That is the perfect way to put it. While the local store down the street was using a shoebox full of handwritten index cards, Blockbuster was using mainframes and barcodes from day one. This was absolutely revolutionary for that industry.
And that's what allowed them to scale up so massively.
It's the only thing that made it possible.
Wow.
The very first store, which opened in Dallas on October 19, 1985, had 8,000 VHS tapes and 2,000 beta tapes.
That way, 10,000 tapes.
Yeah.
In a single store.
In 1985.
10,000 tapes. That must have just completely blown the competition out of the water. My local store had maybe 500 on a good day.
It did. And here's a fun little design note for you. Cook actually tried to join an existing franchise first, a company called VideoWorks, but he left because they wouldn't let him use his own interior design scheme.
No way. Let me guess. The blue and yellow.
The blue and yellow. He had this vision for the branding, the torn ticket stub logo, everything. They said no, so he went out on his own.
That's wild. It's just wild to think that if VideoWorks had just said, sure, David, you can paint the walls blue, Blockbuster as we know it might never have existed.
History turns on these tiny little moments, but Cook was really just the spark, the rocket fuel that came from somewhere else. Or rather, someone else. A man named Wayne Huizenga.
I know that name.
Yeah.
He's the waste management guy, right? The garbage empire.
He is. He was a co-founder of Waste Management. An associate of his, John Milk, happened to see one of Cook's early Blockbuster stores and was just floored by the efficiency of the model. He saw the barcodes, the computers, and he brought Huizenga in.
So now we have an oil data guy and a garbage mogul running a movie business.
It sounds like the setup for a bad joke, but it was a lethal combination for business. Huizenga didn't know a thing about movies, but he knew logistics on a massive scale, and he knew the Ray Kroc model,
The McDonald's model.
the McDonald's model of aggressive, systematized expansion. He brought that industrial scale thinking to video rental. They set a goal to open a new store every 24 hours.
Every single day. That's insane. That's not just aggressive, that's a conquest.
It was a blitzkrieg. They just rolled across the country. They bought up regional rivals like Major Video, Errol's, Sound Warehouse. They didn't compete, they just consumed the market.
And at the same time, they were making a very specific branding choice that set them apart.
Yes, they decided to be family-friendly.
Right. No adult section.
Exactly, no adult films. Now, you have to remember, a lot of independent stores made a significant chunk of their revenue from that back room, behind the beaded curtain.
True.
Blockbuster refused to stock it, and that decision made them safe for the suburbs. Parents felt comfortable dropping their kids off there on a Saturday afternoon. It was a brilliant marketing move.
It was the complete Disneyfication of the video store.
It was. But they also faced threats. Believe it or not, in 1989, Nintendo actually tried to sue to stop video game rentals.
Really?
Yes. They lobbied Congress to ban game rentals outright, arguing it was piracy and would kill game sales.
Wow. I remember renting Nintendo games at Blockbuster all the time. That was huge. If Nintendo had won that lawsuit, it would have wiped out a massive revenue stream for them.
A huge one. But Blockbuster fought it in court, and they won. And that victory basically paved the way for game rentals to become a central pillar of their business for years.
Okay, so by the early 90s, they're just this unstoppable force.
Completely. But here is where the first kind of genius moment of foresight comes in. Wayne Huizenga sells the company.
He gets out at the top.
He sells to Viacom in 1994 for $8.4 billion.
$8.4 billion? That's a great exit. But why did he sell? Did he just want to cash out?
This is the really fascinating part. Our sources indicate that Huizenga actually foresaw the threat. Even back in the early 90s, he was worried about the rise of cable TV and specifically video on demand.
No way. In the early 90s.
He looked at the future, saw that technology might eventually make the physical tape obsolete, and he admitted he didn't know how to solve that future tech problem. So he sold at the absolute perfect peak of the market.
Wow. So the guy who scaled it up essentially predicted the crash 20 years before it happened and walked away with billions. That is, honestly, that's some pretty savvy business.
It is incredible foresight. So
Yeah.
Viacom buys them. They needed Blockbuster's massive cash flow to help finance a bid for Paramount. And under Viacom's ownership, we enter the second phase, the era of the economic engine. This is where the business model shifted again, thanks to Sumner Redstone at Viacom.
Okay, let's unpack the money side of this. Because renting a movie for $3 or $4, it doesn't seem like a way to build a multi-billion-dollar empire unless you have some kind of trick up your sleeve.
The trick was something called revenue sharing. See, the old model was actually pretty painful for a video store.
The pre-Blockbuster model.
A store had to buy a VHS tape from the studio. A copy of a new hit movie might cost that store $65, maybe even more.
$65 for one tape. So you had to rent it out, what, 20 times just to break even on that one copy?
Exactly. And that is why your local mom and pop store only had maybe 5 copies of a big new release. They just couldn't afford to buy 50 copies at $65 a pop.
Okay, so how did Viacom change that?
They used their Hollywood clout to broker a new kind of deal. Blockbuster would get the tapes from the studios for a very, very low upfront cost, sometimes just a few dollars, almost nothing.
Okay.
But in exchange, they would give the movie studio a cut of every rental fee, usually around 40%.
Oh, I see. So the studio becomes a partner in the rental business. They're betting on volume.
Correct. And because that upfront cost was so low for Blockbuster, they could afford to just flood the shelves. They could stock 200 copies of Titanic. They launched that huge guaranteed in stock campaign.
I remember that. If they didn't have the new release you wanted, you got a free rental coupon or something.
Right. And this was the move that absolutely crushed the remaining competition. The little independent stores couldn't get these deals. They were still paying full price for tapes while Blockbuster was getting them by the truckload for pennies up front. It was game over.
This also had to have changed how we browsed for movies, right?
Yeah.
I feel like the store layout itself started to shift around this time.
It did, absolutely. The entire store was redesigned to funnel you like a salmon swimming upstream directly to the new release wall. That's where the money was.
It wasn't about discovering some obscure 70s classic in the back corner.
No. It was about homogenizing film taste. It was about watching what everyone else was watching, because that's what Blockbuster had 500 copies of. It created the Blockbuster culture, not just as a store, but as a media consumption habit.
And it clearly worked from a financial perspective.
It worked like a charm. So by 2004, they reached their absolute peak. They spin off from Viacom. They're an independent public company again. Over 9,000 stores.
Yeah.
Billions in revenue. They look completely and totally invincible.
But 2004, I mean, that's right around when the first cracks start to show, right?
Yeah, okay.
Because we have to talk about the what-ifs, the massive missed opportunities. And there's one big, red, streaming-sized elephant in the room.
The Netflix refusal.
The big one.
The year is 2000. Netflix is a tiny, fledgling startup. They're just doing DVD by mail. Reed Hastings, the founder of Netflix, flies to Dallas to meet with Blockbuster's leadership team. He makes them an offer.
What's the offer?
He proposes selling Netflix to Blockbuster for $50 million.
$50 million for Netflix. Blockbuster probably spent more than that on their blue and yellow carpet in a year.
Probably. And the Blockbuster executives, according to Hastings, basically laughed them out of the room.
They just laughed at him.
They didn't see the value. They thought it was a tiny niche business. Their thinking was, people want to go to the store. They want the instant gratification of grabbing a movie and watching it tonight. They don't want to wait 3 days for a DVD to show up in the mail.
Okay, to be fair, in the year 2000, internet speeds were garbage, and waiting for the mail was kind of annoying. But still, looking back, ouch.
It is the ultimate ouch moment in modern business history. But I want to bring up a different missed opportunity, one that people rarely talk about. And this one actually proves that Blockbuster wasn't just ignoring the future.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Have you ever heard of the Enron deal?
Enron, as in the massive accounting fraud, spectacular collapse of the energy sector.
Enron. The very same. But before they imploded, in the late 90s and early 2000s, Enron was investing billions of dollars in building out a broadband and fiber optics network.
Right, I remember that.
In 2000 and 2001, Blockbuster signed a 20-year exclusive deal with Enron to create a video-on-demand service.
Wait, what? In 2000? That's years before YouTube even existed. That's way before Netflix started streaming.
Years before. The plan was to stream movies directly over Enron's high-speed fiber optic cables right into people's homes. Blockbuster did see the digital future coming. They absolutely knew physical media wouldn't last forever.
So what happened? Why didn't we all have Blockbuster on-demand boxes next to our TVs in 2002?
2 big reasons. First, Enron had the pipes, but Blockbuster really struggled to get the digital rights from the movie studios. The studios were terrified of digital distribution back then. They thought it would just lead to a piracy nightmare.
And the second reason?
Well, the second reason, it was Enron.
Right. Their partner famously imploded in a massive corporate scandal.
The whole deal collapsed. Enron went bankrupt just a short time later, and Blockbuster's early shot at streaming just vanished. But it shows that the narrative of Blockbuster was clueless and didn't know streaming was coming is just false. They tried, they just bet on the wrong partner and arguably the wrong technology-closed fiber optic cables instead of the open internet.
That is fascinating. So it wasn't blindness, it was just really, really bad execution and bad luck.
Exactly. And that theme, bad execution and crippling internal conflict, that brings us to the real cause of death. Because the fatal blow didn't come from Netflix on the outside, it came from a civil war on the inside.
This is the part of the story I really didn't know much about. So who were the combatants in this internal civil war?
In one corner, you have John Antioco. He became the CEO in 1997. He's a sharp retail guy, came from Taco Bell and PepsiCo. He understood the customer. And in the other corner, you have the activist investor, the legendary Carl Icahn.
Icahn is a huge name, a corporate raider type, right?
He's known for being, let's say, aggressive. He gets a position on a company's board, and he pushes for changes that maximize shareholder value, and he wants it now.
Okay, so set the scene for me.
It's 2005. The company is now public again. Antioco knows the business is in trouble. He identifies two huge problems that are killing them. One, customers absolutely hate late fees. Two, Netflix, with its subscription model, is starting to really steal their customers.
The late fees were the absolute worst. I'm pretty sure I still owe them money. I remember racking up like $40 in late fees for one movie and just being too embarrassed to ever go back to that store again.
And you weren't alone. It was the #1 customer complaint by a huge margin. So Antioco makes a bold move. He launches the No Late Fees campaign.
Which sounded amazing. It was a great headline.
It sounded great, but, and here's the classic Blockbuster problem, there was some very tricky fine print.
Uh-oh.
It wasn't really no fees. If you kept the movie for more than 8 days past its due date, the system automatically converted the rental into a sale, and it charged you the full retail price of the movie.
What? So I rent a movie for $4, keep it a week and a half too long, and suddenly I've bought it for $25.
That's exactly what happened, and if you returned it after that, they would refund you the price, but they'd subtract a hefty restocking fee.
That feels really deceptive.
It felt so deceptive that 48 states sued Blockbuster for false advertising.
48.
They had to pay millions in settlements and issue a flood of coupons. It was a PR disaster. But, and this is the weird part, it actually started to bring some customers back. People liked the idea of no late fees, even if the execution was flawed.
Okay, so Antioco is trying, maybe clumsily, to fix the customer relationship. What about the Netflix problem?
This is where Antioco actually gets brilliant. In 2007, he launches a program called Blockbuster Total Access. This was the hybrid model that Netflix could not touch.
Tell me how it worked.
So, you subscribe to Blockbuster online, you pay a monthly fee, just like Netflix, you get your DVDs in the mail, but, and this was the killer feature, when you're done watching a movie, you can take that DVD from the mailer to any physical Blockbuster store, drop it on the counter,
And look.
and you get a free in-store rental. Right there on the spot.
Oh, that is good. That is really good. Because the most annoying part of Netflix back then was the turnaround time. You had to mail it back and wait 2 or 3 days for the next one to arrive.
This gave you instant gratification. It perfectly combined their new online business with their biggest asset, their 9,000 physical stores. It was something Netflix couldn't compete with. And it worked.
How well did it work?
They started gaining subscribers like crazy. They were adding them faster than Netflix was. Reed Hastings, the Netflix CEO, was reportedly terrified. He even approached Antioco again to propose a partnership or a merger because he felt so threatened by total access.
They were winning. They finally figured it out. They had Netflix on the ropes.
They were winning the war for customers, but they were losing the war for the balance sheet. And this is where Carl Icahn enters the ring with his boxing gloves on.
Let me guess. This whole free in-store rental thing was very, very expensive.
It was incredibly expensive. Every time a customer swapped a movie in-store for free, it cost Blockbuster about $2 in lost revenue. They were losing millions of dollars, betting that they could crush Netflix first and then raise prices later.
It's a classic tech startup strategy, right? Burn cash to acquire users and build a moat.
It is. But Blockbuster wasn't a Silicon Valley startup. They were a publicly traded retail company with shareholders who demanded quarterly profits. And one of those shareholders was Carl Icahn.
And he didn't like the cash burn.
He looked at the numbers and said, "You are setting money on fire." He argued that the company was bleeding to death. He wanted to kill total access, cut costs, focus on profitability in the stores, and pay out dividends to shareholders. He waged a very public, very nasty proxy war against Antioco.
And who won that fight?
Aiken won. In 2007, he got his allies on the board, and he successfully pushed Antioco out. Antioco left with a massive severance package, but he was gone. And Aiken brought in a new CEO to execute his vision, a man named James Keyes.
And what was Keyes' background? Was he a tech visionary? A media expert?
He was the former CEO of 7-Eleven.
A convenience store guy.
A convenience store guy.
Yeah.
And his strategy reflected that background perfectly. He immediately rolled back total access. He raised the prices for the online rentals. He effectively killed the one program that was actually beating Netflix.
But what did he focus on instead?
He wanted to double down on the physical retail experience. He wanted to sell more popcorn, more candy, more merchandise. He wanted to make the stores entertainment destinations. He famously downplayed the threat from Netflix, saying that Blockbuster's real competitors were Apple and Walmart.
So right at the exact moment when the entire world was pivoting to digital and streaming, they brought in a guy to focus on selling more Slurpees and DVDs.
That is the tragedy of this whole story. This is the specific moment Blockbuster died. It wasn't in 2010 when they finally filed for bankruptcy. It was right there, in 2007, when the board, led by Aiken, chose short-term quarterly profit over the long-term survival strategy that was actually working.
That is just, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It's like watching a car crash in slow motion where the driver actually have a map to safety, but the passenger grabs the steering wheel and drives them straight off a cliff because it's a shorter route.
That is a very, very apt analogy. And after that, it was just a death spiral. In 2008, in a move that I can only describe as pure desperation, Blockbuster tried to buy Circuit City.
Circuit City, the electronics store that was also very publicly going out of business at the time.
Yes. Analysts at the time called it two drowning swimmers trying to save each other by grabbing onto one another.
That paints a very vivid picture.
The bid was eventually withdrawn, but it just showed a complete lack of vision. They were trying to build a bigger retail fortress just as the entire concept of physical retail was crumbling. By 2010, the debt was just insurmountable. They owed nearly $1 billion.
Wow.
They filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in September 2010.
And that's when the vultures started circling the carcass.
Well, one big vulture swooped in, Dish Network. They bought the company out of bankruptcy in 2011 for about $320 million.
Which is just, it's pennies on the dollar compared to that $8.4 billion valuation back in the 90s.
It's a rounding error. And Dish had a plan, at least theoretically. They wanted to use the Blockbuster brand for their own streaming service, which they called Blockbuster Movie Pass, to compete with Netflix.
Did it work?
Not at all. They never really committed to it. It gained no traction. And they were also very interested in the company for its wireless spectrum rights. By early 2014, Dish announced it was closing all of the remaining corporate-owned stores.
And that just left the franchisees, the independent owners.
Yes. The corporate entity was dead, but the brand itself lived on in these small pockets where local owners were trying to keep the lights on, one rental at a time.
Before we get to the very last one standing, I want to talk about some of the weird tangents in Blockbuster's history. Because looking through the source material, they tried some really wild stuff. They weren't just in the U.S., right? They were global.
Oh, they were a global empire. But their very American, family-friendly model didn't always translate well. Take Japan, for instance.
What was the issue there?
A couple of things. First, Japanese homes are generally much smaller than American suburban homes. They just didn't have the space for the massive superstore footprint that Blockbuster's model demanded. But the bigger issue was cultural.
Okay.
In Japan, adult entertainment pornography accounted for about 35% of the entire video rental market. It was a huge piece of the business.
And Blockbuster, with its family-friendly policy, wouldn't stock it.
They flat out refused. So they were entering this massive market with one hand tied behind their back. Their local competitors just stocked everything the customers wanted and completely crushed them. Blockbuster had to exit Japan in 1999.
That makes sense. You can't impose your corporate morality on a market that clearly wants something else. What about the UK? I feel like Blockbuster was huge there for a while.
It was massive in the UK. They bought a big chain called Cinevision, which was branded as Ritz, and they dominated the high street. But ultimately, they suffered the exact same fate as the U.S. branch. They entered administration, which is the U.K. version of bankruptcy, twice in 2013 before finally disappearing.
Okay, here's one I saw that I had no idea about. Discovery Zone.
Ah, yes, Discovery Zone.
The indoor playground with the tubes and the ball pits and the constant smell of disinfectant. Blockbuster owned that.
In the mid-90s, yes. They invested heavily and eventually took control. It was part of this grand vision. They had to be an entertainment complex company, not just a video rental company.
I had no idea. I just remember getting serious rug burn on those slides.
It was another attempt to diversify that just burned through cash and ultimately failed. Discovery Zone went bankrupt in 1996. But if you think that's weird, let me tell you about the Blockbuster Block Party.
The block party. What on earth was that?
This was a wild experimental concept they tried in Albuquerque and Indianapolis in the mid-90s. I want you to imagine a giant windowless building the size of a city block.
Right.
Inside, you have laser tag, fancy restaurants, motion simulator rides, and huge lounge areas for adults to hang out.
So it was like a Dave & Buster's, but run by Blockbuster.
Essentially, yes. It was their attempt to build an adult entertainment complex. Not in the Japanese sense, but in the night out for grown-ups sense. It was a colossal failure. It just showed that they had all this cash and all this ambition, but they just couldn't figure out what they wanted to be.
A total identity crisis.
Exactly. Were they a tech company? A retail store? A theme park operator? They never knew. And that identity crisis brings us, finally, to the present day, the strange afterlife of the Blockbuster brand, because it just refuses to die.
We have to talk about Bend, Oregon, the last Blockbuster on planet Earth.
It is such a fascinating phenomenon. As of 2019, it's the only one left. And it's become this pilgrimage site for nostalgics, a tourist destination.
I've seen the pictures. They sell their own merchandise. And they have the Russell Crowe memorabilia, right?
Yes, that is a hilarious detail. The TV host John Oliver bought a bunch of Russell Crowe's movie props, including his jockstrap from the movie Cinderella Man, and he donated it all to one of the last Blockbusters in Alaska. When that store finally closed, the items were sent to the store in Bend.
That is just beautifully surreal. And didn't they do an Airbnb thing a few years ago?
They did. In 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic, they listed the entire store on Airbnb. You could rent it out for the night for a 90s-themed sleepover.
What did that entail?
You got to sleep on a pull-out couch in the middle of the aisle, surrounded by thousands of VHS tapes, with an endless supply of snacks and a big TV.
That sounds incredible, honestly. But there's also a weird financial afterlife to the company, right? Or something about a zombie stock.
This is one of those bizarre market anomalies that could only happen in our current era. The corporate entity of Blockbuster didn't technically vanish. It became something called BB Liquidating Inc. It's just a shell company with no assets, no business, nothing.
Okay.
But during the meme stock craze in 2021, with GameStop and AMC shares of BB liquidating suddenly surged by thousands of percent.
Why? Why would anyone buy stock in a dead company?
Who knows?
Yeah.
Nostalgia, confusion, maybe algorithms gone haywire. For a brief, shining moment, people were pouring money into a company that effectively didn't exist anymore just because of the power of that name.
And the website came back recently too, didn't it?
Yes. Just last year, in 2023, the Blockbuster website reactivated with a cryptic message. We are working on rewinding your movie. And their official Twitter account is still active, making jokes about working on the new Blockbuster.
Do you think they're actually planning some kind of comeback? Or is it all just a marketing stunt?
It's likely just brand maintenance, keeping the trademark alive. But in this world of endless reboots and nostalgia plays, who knows? Maybe a Blockbuster-branded streaming service with a cool retro interface could actually find an audience.
I would subscribe to that in a heartbeat. Okay, so let's bring this all together. We've gone from the oil fields of Texas to the last stand in Oregon. When you look at this whole epic arc, what is the big takeaway for you?
I think the summary is this. Blockbuster started as an innovative, data-driven company that used technology to build a monopoly and crush its competition. But when the next great technological shift came, they didn't die because they were blind or stupid. They died because of internal sabotage.
They saw it coming. They had the Enron deal for streaming in 2000. They had the Total Access program that was beating Netflix in 2007. They had the map.
Exactly. They had the technology, they had the strategy. What they lacked was the corporate will to suffer short-term financial losses for long-term survival and gain. Carl Icahn and the board wanted to keep the quarterly earnings high and the stock price stable. And in doing so, they sacrificed the entire future of the company.
It's a lesson for every major business, really. You simply cannot cost-cut your way to innovation.
You cannot. And sometimes the safe bet, which for them was just focusing on their core retail business, is actually the most dangerous, most reckless bet of all.
I want to leave our listeners with one final thought to mull over.
Yeah.
Just imagine an alternate reality. Imagine a world where Carl Icahn doesn't get involved, where John Antioco stays on as CEO, Total access is allowed to keep growing, burning cash but crushing the competition.
It is a very plausible alternate timeline.
In that world, we aren't all sitting around saying Netflix and chill. We're saying Blockbuster and chill. The blue and yellow app is on every smart TV in the world.
And maybe, just maybe, you'd still be able to run out to a corner store on a Friday night and rent a video game and grab a box of Raisinets at the counter.
One can dream. Thanks for listening to this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Take care.